We continue our investigation into anomalous events. At this stage, we are focusing on the category known as glitches in the matrix, specifically the disappearance and reappearance of objects. To analyze these phenomena and move closer to understanding these mysteries, we will use cross-analysis and a deductive analytical method based on logic. When compiling statistics from reported cases describing so-called matrix glitches, several recurring types of experiences have been identified. People most commonly report the following: dreams that predict the future or involve some form of contact, collective visions, telepathy, synchronization with media sources, disappearance and reappearance of objects, digital synchronicities, unknown natural energetic phenomena, the Mandela effect or memory alteration, temporal anomalies, spatial anomalies, precognition, phantoms, ghosts or doppelgangers, interference from higher powers. Based on the data we've gathered online, we can say with confidence that the phenomenon of objects disappearing and reappearing occurs all over the world. It has most likely happened to you as well, you just didn't pay much attention to it. If we narrow it down and focus specifically on cases where objects disappear or seem to teleport, it becomes clear that the phenomenon appears to be directed at people. It's almost as if some kind of experiment is being carried out, and the person becomes a participant, in other words, a test subject.
Yes, but in that case, what role does the person play? Are they a victim?
It doesn't seem that way. It feels more like the phenomenon is trying to disrupt the subject's worldview, to surprise them with something completely out of the ordinary, to break their usual understanding of reality.
But why? And who would need that?
That's exactly what we have to find out. At this stage, we're only at the very beginning. We still need to gather much more data. Do you have any other interesting cases related to this?
Yes, I found 4 cases that might be worth looking at. My plush, very vibrant pink headband vanished into thin air. I had it on my head to keep my face mask out of my hair. I took the headband off and placed it on the bed. When I came back from my shower, it was no longer on my bed. I tore my room apart looking for it, got my mom to come down and help me look for it. There was no sign. It literally was like it vanished. The next morning, I got up and left my room to go to the bathroom. When I came back, the headband was on the floor in front of the bed. The second thing I had happen was something appeared on my dresser. Earlier in the day, I had an iced coffee and put the cup in with the other recycling in the room across from mine. That night, I had left my room to go to the bathroom before I went to sleep, and the iced coffee cup was sitting on the corner of the dresser by the door. I also want to share only myself and my mother were in the house during both of these events, and she slept upstairs and wouldn't have been able to do this.
When I was a kid, I once left our apartment with my mom to go to my dad's workplace. I took a toy with me that shot these heavy little balls. At his work, which was about a 30-minute drive from our house, I lost one of those balls. Later, my mom and I came back home. She went to the kitchen, which is to the right of the entrance, and I went to the living room on the left. Suddenly, I felt something hit me in the back. I turned around and it was that exact same ball. There was no one in the hallway. I shouted to my mom in the kitchen, but she had no idea what I was talking about. It wasn't super creepy or anything, but I've never had an explanation for it. It couldn't have been stuck in my clothes or anything like that. It clearly flew in and hit me in the back from the hallway.
What's both fascinating and surprising is that the scientific community still hasn't seriously begun studying this phenomenon. And yet we can see that it happens quite frequently and all over the world. We can draw that conclusion from the reports people post online. There are a huge number of comments about it on social platforms.
I have a necklace from my grandmother that I like to wear for special occasions. My boyfriend at the time took me out for my birthday, and I decided to wear it. On the way home, we pulled over in a secluded area to fool around. I took my necklace off and then couldn't find it. I was devastated. Months later, my mom asked me if I knew what the necklace was hanging on the back of her door in her bedroom. It was there. Still can't figure it out.
I was working on my motorcycle in the mud, right where I had crashed while trying to do a cool drift. In the process, I broke the clutch and the gear shifter. I brought over a set of wrenches and used one of them to loosen a bolt. I loosened it a bit and put the wrench down on the ground so I could finish unscrewing the bolt by hand. About 2 minutes later, I went to pick the wrench up, and it was gone. I searched absolutely everywhere in that muddy mess, but it was pointless. Luckily, I had a spare wrench in my car. After fixing the bike, I rode home to take a shower and wash all the mud off. I walk into my room and see the wrench lying on my desk. I was completely freaked out.
People often interpret these events as glitches in the matrix. Of course, that idea has mostly turned into a meme, but it doesn't actually explain what's happening or the way this phenomenon seems to interact with people.
Yes, exactly. Objects disappear and reappear. Usually things the person knew about, was thinking about, or considered important. Or items they clearly remember and know exactly where they left them. They're certain about the location and convinced they couldn't have made a mistake. Those things should have been exactly where they expected them to be.
Yes, I remember some truly bizarre cases people told me about. For example, a CNC machinist once said that he took a heavy metal clamp, about 10 kilograms off the machine, and put it on a shelf. He turned away for a moment, and when he looked back, it was gone.
And people tend to react the same way in these situations. They say they can't believe their eyes and start thinking they might be losing their minds.
Yes, exactly. That's precisely what I meant. Or for example, one common way this phenomenon shows up is like this. One man reported that he was playing with his cat. He crumpled up a sheet of newspaper in his hands and tossed it onto the floor, but he never heard it land. The crumpled paper simply vanished in midair. He said he clearly remembers the moment. He and the cat just looked at each other in complete surprise.
Yes, I remember there were some really unbelievable cases. For example, one woman wrote that an item she had lost a year earlier suddenly reappeared while she was at a train station. She opened a luggage locker, and the item was lying right on top of her suitcase.
By the way, there's also a kind of recurring case people report. They say that when they wake up, the front door of their house or apartment is open, and the lock cylinder is sticking out.
Yes, Doc, but that's not really about objects disappearing and reappearing.
You're right. It seems we've already drifted beyond the scope of this topic. It looks like we've exhausted it. We should move on to the next one.
To wrap up this topic, what conclusions have we managed to draw?
First, the phenomenon appears to be directed at people, specifically at their reactions, at their psychological response. Second, the phenomenon seems to display a certain level of intelligence.
Can you support that conclusion?
Well, that conclusion is actually easy to make, even without digging into the full statistics of all the cases. For example, in one of the cases we mentioned, a girl's bright headband disappeared, even though she was 100% sure where she had left it. Or in another case, a cup was in the trash can and later turned up in plain sight in another room. There are also many cases where people search for a missing item for a long time, and out of desperation they address the phenomenon, either silently in their thoughts or out loud. Then the object mysteriously appears in a place they had already checked 1,000 times, or right in plain sight. Doesn't that suggest some kind of intelligence? At that point, it almost seems like there is direct interaction with the person.
What other conclusions have you come to?
Speaking more broadly, what do we have? Often a person doesn't see or sense the phenomenon directly, but many people report a feeling that someone is watching them, an irrational sense of fear, or their hair standing on end for no apparent reason.
You're mistaken, Doc. People often describe physical manifestations of the phenomenon in places where these disappearances and reappearances occur. They report strange sounds, touches, and visual effects in their peripheral vision.
All right, fair enough. I'll agree with you. But here we're moving into completely unknown territory. To understand it, we'll need to keep collecting information on each of these phenomena. So what can we say as we wrap up this video? It seems that this phenomenon may have a common underlying nature, and to understand it, we need to look at it from a broader perspective, taking into account all the related occurrences. I've already started building a logical framework. To understand it, we need to identify the connections. For example, even at the early stages of this research, we've noticed something that seems to unite almost all anomalous phenomena: the observation of glowing spheres or orbs. Broadly speaking, this may be a kind of basic form of the phenomenon, one that appears in cases involving UFOs, ghosts, poltergeists, and even Bigfoot.
It sounds like our world might be in close contact with some other world.
Yes, and when these worlds interact, the phenomenon appears.
Doc, in the next episode, let's start looking into the near-death experience phenomenon.
Good choice. The logic of the events and the statistics of the reports seem to point us in that direction. First of all, it's connected with consciousness and with the manifestation of that other world you mentioned. Could that world be the one people go to after death?
That's what the next episode will be about. Stay with us. Subscribe and tell us your thoughts and stories in the comments. This is only the beginning, and there's much more to come.